So I invite you now to close your eyes and start by taking a nice, deep, infilling, cleansing breath. And let it out slowly as you watch in your mind's eye. All the clutter in your mind simply float away into the nothingness. We use this time to focus on the silent, still power from which we came. And as you turn inward to that place where the God of your being dwells, begin to open up your heart space. Allow yourself to become connected to the inexhaustible and ever-flowing source of divine life. In the truth of this moment, begin to know yourself as love, light, goodness, joy, and peace. As Myrtle Fillmore once prayed, I am now in the presence of pure being, immersed in the Holy Spirit of life. I acknowledge thy presence and power, O blessed Spirit. In thy divine wisdom, now erase any limitations, and from thy pure substance of love, bring into manifestation my world according to your perfect law. It is in this sacred place that we are once again reminded that our wholeness and our well-being are innate. Let us celebrate our capacity to thrive in every circumstance. And with a grateful heart, we make it so.
Yes. Chattanooga's weekly celebration service. Thank you, Landis. I'm Anna Petro, and I'm honored to serve on your board of trustees. I want to thank you for joining this morning, both in person and online. To our online folks, we're very glad that you're here, and please know that you're just as much a part of the service as if you were here in person. So thank you. This morning we welcome our very own Eric Miller as our guest speaker. He and his wife Laura, yay, yes. He and his wife Laura moved here from Las Vegas in 2022 and have both been very active in our church since. I'm looking forward to Eric's talk this morning, and it's going to be on the early life of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, who are the Unity founders. Do we have any visitors this morning, or someone that hasn't been here in a while? Please raise your hand and say, hi, welcome. Now is the time in the service where we would like to welcome those of you who are new, or if it's been a while since you visited. We are honored that you have joined us today. Our usher has a welcome pack with information about Unity as a church, as well as the New Thought movement. We extend a special blessing to you. So, everyone warm up your hands, okay? And we all say together, we love you, we bless you, we appreciate you, and we behold the Christ in you. Okay. The Christ in you refers to the spark of divinity, the same quality of being that Jesus and other spiritual leaders brought forth in demonstrating in their ministries. Unity of Chattanooga is a part of Unity Worldwide Ministries, which states, Unity is a global, inclusive spiritual community that offers practical, uplifting resources to help all people of all faiths apply positive spiritual principles and practices to their lives. We honor the universal truth in all religions and respect each individual's right to choose a spiritual path. We choose to embrace the rich diversity that lives within God's oneness, and we celebrate the differences of opinions, beliefs, and identities. Speaking of our oneness in God, we'd like to take this time to acknowledge that February is Black History Month. It's a time to reflect on how far we've come in the fight for racial equality, the leaders and many activists who have paved the way, and the systemic barriers that still stand in the way for equality for all Black Americans. The soul of America was founded on the idea that we are all created equal and everyone deserves to be treated with equal dignity. We're proud to join in the celebration of the contributions of Black Americans and how their culture has enriched every aspect of American life. Amanda Gorman, who was the youngest inaugural poet in U.S. history, read her original poem at Biden's inaugural ceremony. And this was in 2001, and it states, "There is always light if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it." Now, this is the time in our service where we welcome you to get up and greet your neighbors with a fist pump, a hug, or a simple namaste.
Simple namaste.
Sorry for that little dance. Oh, I gotta turn this on. Okay. We are a cool new toy. That sounded good before, it sounds pretty good now. And thumbs up from the second part, awesome. Kind of pace back and forth, pulling away. Hi everybody, welcome. Angels, man, yeah, isn't that what it's about? And this morning's talk, I'm going to be talking about the early lives of Myrtle and Charles Fillmore, and it's think in terms of those angels, you know. And as you hear all the streets that they crossed to get where they got to, I mean, it's really incredible. And you know, how many people are familiar with the Household of Faith? I know you are. It was written in 1951. The foreword was by Lowell Fillmore, their eldest son. And it's a story of unity. It's a story of unity. I've been around unity for a while, but I never knew a lot of the stuff, and especially the early life. Mary Carolyn Page was born August 6, 1845, in a little town called Pagetown in Ohio. It was a small community, about halfway between Columbus and Cleveland. They were strict. She grew up in a strict Methodist Episcopal household, and they weren't allowed to. Where all types of amusement were frowned upon. The kids weren't even allowed to dance or play cards or anything like that. She grew up in this tight small town where she knew everybody, and they were the influential citizens, so they had to kind of represent. She was the youngest of 9 children, too. She wasn't. Excuse me. And her father, she was her father's favorite, and he started calling her Myrtle Lee when she was very young. And it just stuck, Myrtle Lee, Myrtle Lee, Myrtle Lee. She eventually went into Myrtle as she matured. She was not a robust person. She grew up believing that she had tuberculosis, that she had inherited tuberculosis. That's kind of what her family told her. She had this flaming red hair. She was a redhead. How many people knew that Myrtle Fillmore was a redhead? I did. And she didn't let that beat her though. Even at a young age, she was like, well, I'm still going to participate in church activities and be as active as I can. Her father, who did think of her as his favorite, secretly taught her the Highland fling, you like this dance at the time. And again, we're talking 1845, 1850, when she's like, 5 years old and just maturing and waking up to the world. This is before the Civil War, it's before Abraham was shot, it's before Mark Twain. This is kind of what we're talking about. She did, excuse me, end up with a better than average education for a woman at that time. And in 1867, when she was 22, she went to Oberlin College and took a literary course for ladies. So when she left college, she went to live with her brother David in Clinton, Missouri, which is like 70 miles southeast of Kansas City. And there she began teaching. So that was 1845 to 1867, about in her life. Charles was born, had a much different childhood than Myrtle did. He was born on an Indian reservation in Minnesota Territory in 1854, August 22. I find that interesting. Myrtle was born on August 6th, for all you horoscope people out there, and Charles was born August 22. Fun fact. 9 years apart. She was 9 years older than him. So yeah, he grew up in this, it's outside of St. Cloud town, but it was an Indian reservation. Minnesota had just been declared a territory in 1849, a territory, not a state. And there had been a treaty signed with the Dakota people of the Sioux for this area around kind of Minneapolis and southern Minnesota now. And it opened a homestead in 1854, and it bam, his father had moved there. They grew up in Buffalo, New York. They were second cousins. His father was a second cousin to Millard Fillmore, who was our 13th president, who had just completed a term. He served and took over for Taylor. So their second cousin was the president of the United States from Charles' father's, I guess it would be his third cousin then. Still, but that's pretty cool, right? He had this neat connection, but Henry didn't want any part of that. He moved to out west to Minnesota and in the Indian Territory and became a fur trader with the Chippewa. And then he quickly met a woman from Nova Scotia who was down because it was French Indian then. And so the sort of English, German, Caucasians that moved west hadn't gotten there yet. So they were really frontiers people. We have this idea of pioneers, but we're not to the mines yet. I should jump ahead to the mines. There's mines in this story. Silver mines. So stay tuned. Is this boring? Is a history lesson boring? Yeah, good. Yeah, because I find it really interesting too. You have to check with the audience. So yeah, his mother's name was Mary Georgina Stone. So Charles Sherlock Fillmore. Sherlock was his middle name. How many people knew that? Stop. You can't play anymore. Because she read this book. She's the one who turned. She has a copy of it. Amanda Adamson has a copy of this book, and she loaned it to me, and I read it. And so I went online and found it. I wanted the original 1951 first pressing. And it has been reissued. I think it's called The Story of Unity now. It's a paperback. It's basically the same stuff. I bought it too. I'm an author. I did that kind of stuff. So August 22, 1854, at 4 a.m. in this log cabin in Indian Territory, really, what was considered Indian Territory outside what today St. Cloud was just beginning as a city. It hadn't been incorporated as a town yet. And so his friends were the Sioux. Charles' friends growing up were Chippewa and Sioux natives, and he used to run in their villages and play with them because that's who he knew. They had to chop a lot of wood in Minnesota because the only thing keeping them alive, I guess, Charles wrote about this later, was they had a big stone fireplace in this log cabin. Minnesota, I went to school in Minnesota. Minnesota gets cold. And so they learned it to the kids, him and his son, him and his brother, learned to chop wood at an early age. But they were playing with the Sioux, they were playing with the Indians. And it was a hard life being a fur trader, but food was plentiful, and they had this community. They were fitting into this community. But then a funny thing happened. Should I read that passage now? No, so one night, after Henry had left, he decided, so this guy has his family, pops out 2 kids, or one, sorry, 2 kids, because Norton was his brother Norton. The father picked up and built another cabin 10 miles north into Indian territory, and left his wife and 2 young kids, 7-year-old Charles was 7 and Norton was 5, in this cabin. So he had a real, he had to probably work at a young age, but his spirit was always, he was always curious, he was always trying to learn things. When he was really young, he doesn't remember it, but other people reported, his mother reported when this book was being written, that a medicine man from one of the local tribes one night burst into their cabin, and Charles was only 2 years old, and snatched him out of Mary's arms, and took off. And this is still a time, at 2 years old, that would be 1856. This is before the Little Bighorn. This is before Custer's Last Stand. This is 20 years before. The Indians were fighting amongst themselves in that area. There's 7 different bands of Sioux, and plus the Chippewa are there, and there's other Métis from Canada that had interest in that region. So it was a wild country. And then you had these French fur trappers moving through in these mule teams. So, what must have gone through that mother's head? This shaman, full war paint, with all the people snatched. Charles doesn't remember any of it, but he's always felt, because he was only 2 years old at the time, but he always had the feeling. He remember when he got back safely. The Native Americans brought him back safely to his mother's arms. He always felt he'd been used in a mystical ceremony. He always had that deep-seated belief. He couldn't quite remember it because he was only 2, but isn't that cool? Isn't that cool? So Henry was this recluse, right? His second cousin is the president of the United States, and he's not calling in any chips. He's moving out into Indian territory, and once he got there, he moved even further. So his father was an interesting. They saw him a little bit. He would let the kids come visit him, but there was a distance there. And it must have been genetic, because at 10 years, when Charles was 12, his younger brother Norton was 10. He ran away from home. They're living, this is halfway between what is now Fargo. Fargo was nothing then, that was Dakota territory, and Minneapolis, St. Paul, which wasn't much. So they're in between those 2 things. Your 10-year-old runs off. What drove the 10-year-old boy to run away from home? He lost touch with him. He had very sporadic contact with Norton. So that isolationist gene must have been in the family, because father had it, and his younger son had it. But Charles definitely did not have it. Charles was just inquisitive about everything, and he learned at a quick rate. And then it came down to just him and his mom living in this cabin. He called it later in life romantic, but crude and unprofitable. He said it was kind of a Huckleberry Finn existence, which I find interesting because also a fun literary fact. Huckleberry Finn wasn't published until 1884, 30 years later. So, in his life, looking back at it, he used the metaphor, but he had actually lived kind of this northern Huckleberry Finn life, which he did remember. Let me see, I was going to read a passage for this. because it's so hard to find their actual, oh yeah, and another backstory about the family. Charles Fillmore once wrote about one of his ancestors, John Fillmore. As a boy of 13, this John Fillmore was kidnapped off the coast of England by pirates. Literally. Pirate story. I forgot to tell you, pirate story too. Silver mines and pirate stories. What more do you want? Should be a movie, right? So he was on that pirate ship for 18 years. 18 years. And one night, him and one of his other kind of fellow indentured servants to these pirates, they waited for the pirates to get all drunk, and they got drunk and they were passed out on the boat. And so John, this ancestor of Charles, tied up the pirates and sailed into Boston Harbor and turned them in. Yeah. They got the reward money. The pirates ended up being hung for piracy. But this, Boston Harbor was coming into it to have a judge and jury there. It probably wasn't that distant of a relative, but that pirate spirit, and then that John Fillmore was moved to the Buffalo area and was a descendant of, or Mildred Fillmore, and the rest of the Fillmores were his descendants. So I was like, wow, a pirate story. For those of you who don't know, Laura and I, we had a pirate wedding in Las Vegas. When we got married, everybody dressed, including everybody who came dressed as pirates. But we were successful pirates. We were pirates that kind of, it was like a pyramid scheme kind of pirate, we had other pirates working for them. So we all had nice clothes. Someone did have a bird though. No, a lot of eye patches. A lot of eye patches. Anyway. So yeah, romantic but crude but interesting. After, in 1866, the year after, that's when Norton ran away. It was 1866. This is 1 year after the Civil War had just ended, and Lincoln had been shot. That's the time this 10-year-old decided to take off out west. So to make ends meet, Charles' mother became a dressmaker. But not long after, he had this skating accident, which a lot of us know Charles Fillmore was famous for healing this leg. He had this skating accident, and he went through all these physicians. So some of us complain about doctors now. But back then, for 2 years, they put leeches on them, they cut open their own running sores to bleed this out. After 2 years, his leg and his hip socket, because he was a growing boy, he was 12 years old, it just completely, he built his own crutches to get around. And this is important because later in life, and when he died, autopsy on his body, he had 2 perfectly straight legs, and his hip was, that's another story. That's the story of, all this back stuff is, we see what inspired them to be the angels that they were walking on the streets amongst everybody. They were so down to earth. So, terrible disease in his leg, things that they did to him. During this time, he met this other kid, Edgar Taylor. And Edgar Taylor was the son of an army officer that was stationed nearby, and he had this wife, Carolyn Taylor. And she had a college education. A woman with college education was out there in Minnesota. Women didn't have college educations back then. So, but she was passionate about trying to teach her son literary and philosophical. Her son, he was like, "Ooh, I'm out there." Charles didn't have that ability because of his bum leg. So he was drawn to this Carolyn Taylor, and she loved having some of it. She turned him on to Shakespeare, Alfred Lord Tennyson, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and the other transcendentalists like James Lowell. And about some real topics. I mean, the transcendentalists were really questioning what Orthodox theology really meant. You know, they were breaking down all these rituals and stuff. And like, why are we doing it? That's what the transcendentalists started. They made the connection to nature and the whole world around us rather than doctrine. And that's when this period was happening. So that's important because that was influenced how he thought. Even he named his first son after Lowell, and his second son, Waldo, after Rickard, Waldo for Ralph Waldo Emerson. That son didn't like Waldo, so he went by Rickard most of his life. But no one got named Sherlock, but Sherlock, can you believe it? Charles Fillmore. Oh, yeah, get to the monument. Yeah, we haven't got to the monument story yet. We're getting there, because in 1874, at the ripe old age of 19, with his bum left leg, he had heard about these fortunes being made out west. He packed his clothes, he went down to the train depot in St. Cloud, and got on a train, and because he had a cousin in Cato. Cato was in Oklahoma Territory, which was Indian country. It's right north of the Texas border. And so he went down there in 1874. The Battle of the Little Bighorn is coming up now. The Battle of the Little Bighorn hadn't happened yet. That's something in the Dakotas, but still Oklahoma is kind of close enough to the area at the time. In 1876, we're only 2 years away, 2 years before. And I find that interesting in our history, right? Like, where were they in their lives as we kind of bookmark our own, right? So anyway, he heard about these fortunes, and so he takes off. He goes down. He doesn't like Cato. Cato is in Indian territory. He just doesn't have the opportunities. He's 19. So he moves to Denison, Texas. Everybody knows Texas. And there, he made friends with a railroad clerk, and he just helped the clerk around the train depot, because again, his bum leg, could go out and play with the other kids. Well, when the chief controller got sick, Charles took over the job, so he became the railroad chief at a really young age, and he stayed there in. So that was 1874, right? So he moved to Denison after Cato, and that's where he started joining these philosophic and literary groups. And in one of those groups, that's where he met Myrtle in 1876. And she had gotten a job after she started teaching when she got back to school in Denison, like about a year before Charles. So their lives intersected in Denison, Texas in 1876. And they hit it off right away. They just, they went fossil hunting together and did all these, talk. And these are two people, she's 9 years his elder. That was a big deal back then in the 1800s. That kind of age difference, especially in that direction, where the woman is older than the man. But they hit it off immediately, but then her teaching gig got ended. And so she moved back to Clinton, Missouri. Well, Charles, being the polite gentleman that he was, wrote to her asking if they could continue their acquaintance. And that's how he put it. May we continue this acquaintance that we have? I can just imagine. So a lot of Myrtle Fillmore's writings were lost because they were personal letters. Like, we quote the ideas and stuff behind a lot of what she said, and we tribute in history, in the literature. But there's not a lot of direct writing by her, because the letters that she wrote went to individuals. Individuals either threw them out or kept them. But this was her response to Charles' letter in 1878, asking if they could continue their acquaintance. I was truly pleased to find when I returned from my visit in the country Thursday, among my other mail, a letter from you, Such a correspondence would prove rather a treat than a burden to me. I shall ever feel grateful to you for contributing so much to my literary enjoyments and for the new thoughts and suggestions, yes, and for a kind of sympathy I seldom meet. I've learned many lessons in the past year. What the world teaches profits to the world. What the soul teaches profits to the soul. Which then first stands erect with Godward face when she lets fall her pack of withered facts, the gleanings of the outward eye and ear, and looks and listens with her finer sense, nor truth nor knowledge cometh from without. That's the whole idea that like what we really know is inside us. And that was her reply to Charles. So it went on for a bit longer than that, but I thought that was beautiful. I love how she put that in. It's early. It's like, oh, that's why the spark within the divinity. They were already thinking those thoughts just as individuals. So they did continue their correspondence. Charles stayed at the railroad yard about one more year, and he was already getting itchy, wanted to leave. He stood up for one of his co-workers that had been falsely accused by this railroad VIP, and he got fired for it. He got fired for standing up for this other guy. And he was like, fine, I'm out of here. Because he had heard there had been silver discovered in Colorado. So he went up into Colorado and got involved in that. His first job, which one of these slides has, he was a mule team driver across the mountains, supplying mines and stuff. And so this is like 1878. There's no roads, trails, stuff. He was driving mule teams, those are horses, but similar, but in supply lanes. Over the Rocky Mountains, in winter, there's ice there. There's a lot of snow. It's really cold for all of you that have never been there. But I know some of you know Colorado very well. So he's a mule team driver. One time he lost the whole team, the carts, and he jumped off barely to safety as the mule team fell down this cliff. And so he had to walk back to town. So he had quite he was living this kind of adventurous life, growing up on an Indian reservation, and went off and falling in love, and then having this grand adventure. Maybe he was probably like, I refuse to die here, so he left off. I can just imagine. It was a very risky job. He got into real estate. He became an assayer, like an estimator on real estate, and moved to Gunnison, Colorado. And there he met a lot of the influential people for, oh my goodness, sorry, hold on, let me go speed up. Soon after they got so he goes back and marries Myrtle. They write to continue in the spring of 1881. He goes from Colorado back to Clinton. They get married on March 29th, the night of their wedding. They got on a train back to Colorado. And it was a 3-week journey. There was a stagecoach. They almost fell off the side of the mountain. So after they got to Gunnison, they went to Pueblo. There was this big real estate boom. So, I'm an estimator, I'm an assayer, real estate boom, ching, 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 ching. He started making some money. First, more prosperous than he'd ever been. But then there was a bust, a real estate bust, and when they relocated to Pueblo, from Gunnison to Pueblo, he had 10 cents in his pocket. He got a room for him and Myrtle, and then he called the grocery, sent a message to the grocery for grocery COD. And when the grocer got to the room, they couldn't pay. Charles wasn't even there, and so the grocer took back the groceries. Charles had been out canvassing for work during this little interlude, and he met a friend. He saw a friend of his from his prior adventures in Colorado, and he borrowed $10 from him. So he goes back to the grocery store, And he acts all mad. He's furious over the misunderstanding. He notices the guy has some spare space over on the sides. Maybe we could make this right if you let me use that space over there and set up my real estate office. And so he did. And so he participated in this real estate boom up until shortly after his two sons were born, and then it all went bust, and he lost everything. And so they moved back to Kansas City, not to Clinton, but to Kansas City. And there was a real estate boom there for a little while that he participated in, but then they all went bust. And he went out to Silverton because he still had interest in that. That's how they traveled. That's a realty through the mountain. That's flat, obviously. Wicked life, right? There was this other boom, and so he got his silver mine in Silverton. He went out there for 3 months to just, and Myrtle got better. Her inherited tuberculosis was better. So the high mountain there, they realized, oh wow, that's great. But when everything went bust and the vein ran dry, they had to move back to Kansas City. She got sick again, really sick, sicker than she'd ever been. And so that when they didn't know what they were doing, in the spring of 1886, a friend said, you should go hear this. So obviously, they're a tight couple now. They've been through these trials and tribulations, and they're together. And she's on the verge of death. She's being told she's on the verge. She's going to die soon. They go to this lecturer that had been recommended to them by a friend, Dr. E.B. Weeks, who was a traveling representative of the Illinois Metaphysical College, a school of thought that had just been formed by Emma Curtis Hopkins. So those of you who don't know Emma Curtis Hopkins, she had been co-editor with Mary Baker Eddy on the Christian Science Journal. They had a falling out, and started her own thing out west. But Charles and Myrtle went to this talk just hoping for an answer to what they should do next. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it is beautiful. They hear him talk, and they were inspired. Myrtle was just blown away. And she started saying, as she walked from the hall, one statement repeated over and over in a moment. I am a child of God, and therefore I do not inherit sickness. Over and over in her mind, she said these words told like a bell. I am a child of God, and therefore I do not inherit sickness. In 1 hour, Myrtle Fillmore's whole outlook toward herself and her life had changed. Like a revelation that surely was. This simple and divine idea that she was a beloved child of God, and that God's will for her could only be perfect life and wholeness, filled her mind and possessed her being. The old belief that she was an invalid, that she had been born to be an invalid, was as waters that have passed away. Even as she stepped out of the doors of the hall, this divine realization was working in her, not only in her mind, but in the very cells of her body. I am a child of God, and therefore I do not inherit sickness. Like the little leaven that leavens the whole loaf, this thought was to work in her until it had made every whit whole. It was not to let her go until her thousands had been made whole too. Until through her thousands had been made whole too. And it set a fire. And it founded a faith that reached around the world and blessed the lives of millions who with her would joyously declare, I am a child of God, and therefore I do not inherit sickness. I am a child of God, and therefore I do not inherit sickness. Doesn't that sound good? Next time, the founding of unity. Dun, dun, dun. Oh, thank you. This is the meditation that Amanda did a couple of weeks ago, and I just thought it was so beautiful. I close my eyes and open my heart. I gently inhale the breath of spirit, filling my whole body with the life-sustaining breath of God. I exhale fully, releasing all that does serve my good, does not serve. I exhale fully, releasing all that does serve my good and the good of others. I breathe in perfect peace and well-being. I breathe out and release all inner conflict within me. I allow the love and light of the good to wash over me. I am immersed in the river of life and flow easily, trusting the flow of the current to take me forward.
Kelly's gonna be doing the offering in a little bit.
You guys didn't know I was doing the offering this morning, did you? Neither did I. So let's just take a moment and just realize that God's reciprocal. Our abundance is reciprocal. Love flows through us, through everything we give, receive, and everything that we have. And so it is. Everybody ready to say the statement? Divine love flows through me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. I give in love and I receive in abundance. Grateful, grateful. I am grateful for all that I am, all that I have. I am grateful. I'm so Father, we are so grateful for this abundance, for this energy that's represented here, the abundance of our church, the abundance of our church, the abundance of all our family here. We just thank you. And so it is. Thankful, thankful. I am thankful for all that I am, all that I have. I am thankful. I'm so
Thank you, Eric. That was so interesting and informative. Thank you so much for sharing that. I had no idea that the Fillmores went through everything that they went through to get to where they needed to be. It's amazing how far we've come. I did look this up. Unity has gone now from what the Fillmores to now, which is 650 churches and 1,600 spiritual leaders. So we've come a long way. That's according to Wikipedia. Of course, they're always right. Also want to thank all those responsible for the behind the scenes that make this service possible. That includes Laura Miller, who does our live stream, and Tony Carter, who is on our sound. Thank you guys. Remember the request for volunteers that we sent out probably a few weeks ago to start working on our future church home? Well, we had 21 volunteers last Sunday, which was amazing. People that aren't members or have never been to Unity showed up because they were aware of this building and they love this building so much. Everyone came together in love and vision to work to make our space amazing. We're still looking for several volunteers to help us with the live stream as well as a couple of other tasks. So training will be available, of course. Thank you, Laura. Last week we put out a donation box to collect funds for Terry Loveless. Last week we received $328. That's adding to the January tithe of $522 to total a gift of $850 to help Terry cover his expenses. Terry's family sends everyone a heartfelt thank you for the generous gifts. So thank you all. This Tuesday evening, the 27th at 6:30, Keith and Laura Noyes will be presenting a session on Qigong in the lower level here at the church. And if you're like me, and I know I am, I had to look up what is Qigong. So here it is. Qigong. See, I can't even pronounce it right either. Qigong is a system of coordinated body posture and movement, breathing and meditation useful for the purpose of health and spirituality. And no experience is required, so we hope to see you all this Tuesday at 6:30 here. Also, next week, we welcome back Sean O'Shea, who will be our guest speaker, so I hope you will all be able to attend as well. Today is potluck, and it looks like Penny is setting up a few of our savory and sweets. And finally, and this is so exciting, remember that vision board that we put together, everyone in this church collectively, of what we saw as our future church home? Well, you created the vision board and it's here. The board invites you to our open house today at our new future church home at 105 McBrien Road. The open house starts at 1:15, and so please pop in and take a look. Yeah.
It's close, it's nearby.
Yes, oh, it's very close. Just go out there and make a left or right. Just put your GPS, it's right around the corner. Right, okay. So when is our first service, you ask? Well, the plan is we will have our first Sunday celebration service at our new church home on Sunday, April the 7th, and that is right around the corner. So we are so excited about that, and we look forward to seeing you guys next week as well as that date. So now, please join us and stand and singing this peace song.
light of God surrounds us, the love of God informs us, the